So today's presentation is going to be divided in three sections. I'm going to start by telling you a little bit about myself, my education and my work experience. Then we're going to talk about managing a design team, and this is from an actual management point of view. We'll discuss some processes and tools, and then we're going to effectively leading a design team, which focuses more on the personal side of things and how to help your designers thrive. So let's start. So a little bit about me. My name is David Silva. I am originally from Colombia. I have been living in the US for about 10 years now. I went to college for software engineering. So I started my career as a full stack developer, but I always had an inclination for design and all things creative. I always thought it was pretty cool. So I learned the tools on my own, and this was long time ago. So we're talking about like I was actually learning how to use CorelDRAW and all that kind of stuff. So I know I'm dating myself a little bit here, but that's cool. So getting into design, it led me to focus on the front-end development and web design because it allowed me, that combination allowed me to explore both development and design at once. So I could be doing code, I could be doing some prototypes, some mockups, and it just let me do a little bit of both. Then I worked for an agency for a long time. I was doing mostly informational websites and e-commerce. And you know, when you work at a very small place, you have to wear many hats. So I had to do a little bit of project management, SEO. I was doing the like business requirement gathering, the design briefs and all these. And at some point, as I was gaining a little bit of experience, I realized a lot of the combination of the things I was doing, they started calling it user experience. So I decided that was pretty cool, getting into the research, getting into the prototyping, mockups, and talking to the users and doing the persona exercise. That was my path. Then my job started taking me in the direction of enterprise applications, and that's what I've been doing ever since. That's just where my career took me, and I had a lot of or a strong focus on digital transformation. And on a more personal note, I love going to the gym. I like traveling and trying new foods to anywhere I go. It's always a lot of fun. So now let's talk about managing a design team. You know, the way designers work and interact with each other and with the rest of the organization has significantly changed in the recent years. And this has made more evident or more important to have a management process that is tailored for a design team and is often referred to as design ops. So let's define design ops. Design ops refers to the orchestration and optimization of people, processes, and the craft or the design in order to amplify the design's value and the impact at scale with the organization. The main goal of design ops is to address challenges such as creating efficient workflows, improving the quality and impact of design deliverables, growing and evolving the design team. And by evolving, I mean teams that have gone from one discipline to multiple, like when you have a team of UX designers, for instance, and then you start adding researchers, copywriters, front-end developers, and just becomes a very diverse team. And finding and hiring the right people with the right skills to complement the team. So I think I want to start by asking if any of you guys are like already running design ops in your organization, or you have this design ops mentality in your team. Perhaps anybody wants to give an example. And maybe I'm gonna start with my first example. So I think the first time I started hearing about design ops, it was a team where it was a very large team. It was actually mostly graphic designers at that point, and then we had some UX designers, and it was just so many deliverables, and we were creating so many images and banners. It was for email campaigns and to put on the website. So what we started doing was just like doing daily stand-ups, making sure we have a board. We were using Asana at that point, and just kind of tracking everything that was going on, kind of moving it from one column to the other, what's in progress, what's done, what's falling behind, and see who else who can help the other person, or who has maybe the bigger load, and we need to help him with that. Um, that's what we were doing, and that worked pretty good. That was a very small, or a very basic starting point for design ops, and that it just adding that little bit of organization, it helped us a lot. And of course there are a little bit, or there are some more complex processes that you can implement within a team, um, that can just get a little bit more complex. Okay, let's move on. So designers are often too busy to design. And gone are the days where designers didn't have a say. We just have won the battle to be seated at the table and to have a voice. Of course, there are exceptions. I mean, there are plenty of places where still the design team is kind of on the side. But for the most part, we're now part of the broad conversation, the strategic conversations. And many organizations don't need to be convinced of the value of design anymore. They just get it, and they see the value that the team brings to the organization. And that is a catch 2020, unfortunately, because when designers are recognized into the strategic conversations and the planning sessions, it often comes with a big additional workload, and it's no longer just about designing and research. And that's why designers are often too busy to design. Um, and it's not just that, it's just not about the increasing workload, because we're not never changing world, especially last 2 years have been a little crazy, and we're dealing with more complex projects, and the ones that are designing applications, they're getting a lot more demanding than ever before. um, Plus the operational challenges. So you have teams that are distributed across different locations. You have, because of that, you have the workflows and the decision making that are also very distributed, being in different locations, and sometimes your manager is in a completely different place. And even now, if you even people are experiencing being in the same city, but everybody's just being separate. Also, the products and experiences that we design continue to be much more elaborate because of the same point that as technology evolves, we have to introduce a lot more features, and everything's is a little bit a bigger application, no longer like the smaller ones that we had in the past. And when the organization grows, we also have, sometimes they start adopting a product or project specific team, and this causes that designers are kind of working in a silo, and so there's a disconnect among the designers or the different teams that are just across the organization. So a way to manage these complexities, we need to scale design as a whole, and we must figure out how to mitigate the growing amounts of bureaucracy, because that's usually one of the bigger problems. And it's not just about how to handle more work and how do we manage the additional workload, but it's also the creative teams, they grow at a faster rate than the rest of the company. And that's because companies start realizing the return on investment of having the designers, having the user experience people, the product designers, everything. And so they start adding a ton of people, and it's usually very disruptive. Design ops is for all. So design ops is intended for all designers and all user experience professionals. And we use the term design and designer as a general term throughout the conversation. But let's keep in mind that design ops applies to anyone that is applying user center and design thinking processes to solve any problem. So that applies to the entire design team. And when we say designer, just to touch on that, we're talking about UX designers. It can be product designers, user researchers, visual designers, content strategists. We have service designers now, more and more, communication designers, front end developers, and anyone else that is within that team contributing to the end user experience for our users that the team is working on. So let's talk about the components of design ops. Design ops involves anything that is related to enabling a consistent and quality design deliverables. There are a lot of components within design ops, and your team or the organization can pick and choose based on their needs and the pain points. Uh, it really is about what you need to take care of first at that time and point. And that means that design ops is going to look very different from one organization to another, and even between different teams of the same company, because it's just not one size fits all. It's just about what the team needs at that moment. And that's why the focus of design ops often changes. And as the team changes and evolves and grows, those needs also change, and you need to change your strategy a little bit. So let's talk about the pillars of design ops. There are plenty of options an organization may choose from to focus on when they're planning and implementing these processes to support the designers, or when they start implementing design ops. And according to Nielsen Norman Group, we can separate all of these in three main areas. And those are how we work together, how we get our work done, and how our work creates impact. So whichever of these that you of your team chooses to live by is going to drive those areas that you should focus on. So let's talk about each one of these in detail. Design ops focus on how we work together. It helps us plan for how we organize, collaborate, and humanize. So let's dive into a little bit into one of those. So plan for how we organize. How do we structure our teams and build the right team? And these may include things such as designing an organizational structure for the design team itself, also known as an org chart. We can be creating a complementary skills complete design team, meaning creating a cross-functional team, and defining the role of the individual designer and the role of the design department as a whole. We also have how we collaborate. So how do we create environments and gatherings that enable effective communication? And these could include things such as defining a structure for regular rituals and meetings, whether you want to run the scrum with your team or have just daily stand-ups, like I was giving the example before. Some teams I see, they like to have some critique sessions, or anything that fits your team that you guys like to do as it's a gathering space for the designers. It's what that will be about. It's also about ensuring that the group spaces and environments are conductive to collaboration. And I'm talking about physical spaces that allow you or your designers to gather and work in a brainstorming session with a whiteboard. I know we all love to do that. Well, at the same time, it can be a place where everybody's going to be on their own and you need to get some work done. You're going to put on your headphones and get some quiet time and finish your work, right? It's also about establishing a community of practice for skills and to share their interests. And that can be in a team itself, just among the people that are participating there. It can be among different teams in the company. That's very common in the very large companies where they kind of have like a kind of social media. The intranet used to be the case. So that's very important for the design teams. And then how we humanize. So how do we ensure that hiring and the onboarding process and the professional development practices treat employees like humans first? And these could be things such as designing an interview practice that are specific to the needs of the design team, because it's not the same hiring designers than hiring an accountant or hiring someone in the operational in an operational function. It's also about establishing a consistent hiring and onboarding practice to set up new members for success. And that's really about the onboarding experience, making sure the person, the new employee, has access to everything they need and access to their applications, to manuals, to documentation that they need, and also standardizing the transparent career pathway for management and non-management roles. And this is about having a clear path to where I'm going from a particular position after I'm hiring to the team. You have to set those expectations very clear because career development is important for everybody. So I think you have to be transparent about that. Now let's talk about design ops with an effort on how we get our work done. And these help us plan for how we standardize, how we harmonize, and how we prioritize the workload of the team. So let's talk about planning for standardization. How do we facilitate the design quality through consistent tool sets and processes? And we're talking about documenting, talking about like what I was saying about the onboarding and having this documentation. So it's about documenting and optimizing the high level design process. So from initiation through delivery, what is it that the designer is going to have to follow through at a general level? And again, it's very helpful if you're working in a team that produces deliverables that have to be picked up by another team. Um, for instance, when you have some developers that are going to create the design of a website and then they finish an HTML prototype, and that's going to be handed off to the backend developers so that they can build the backend, or you have graphic designers that are going to be producing images to be inserted into an email campaign, or perhaps it's going to be printed material. And having these documentations is just one of those things that are incredibly helpful for new hires and onboarding. It's about also defining and aligning the purposeful design activities within the design process, and about auditing and enforcing the use of the same design tools for an efficient collaboration. So there has to be a consensus within the team and all of its members on the tools that are going to be used, and to make sure that everybody wants to use them and is going to be committed to use them so that this works for everybody. Then plan for how we harmonize. How do we share and expand design intelligence so that we all work from the same shared understanding and build common ground? And we're talking about scaling and maintaining or managing the design systems to create efficiencies for designers. So when we document all these processes, everything's become more efficient because now there's like a clear process that everybody has to follow, or that it's suggested to follow. We're talking about building repositories of user research that anyone can access and use. And it can also be a digital asset management platform or any system similar to that, that you can share templates and images. Sometimes it's something as simple as having a shared Google Drive, and that works for any of these purposes. Then how we prioritize. How do we make decisions about what projects to work on and when to work on them? So this might consist on things such as uncovering and exposing the bottlenecks in the design workflow so that you can address those issues and make operation more smooth. You have to figure out where things are falling behind, where there's always something's getting stuck, and what's the issue so that you can optimize or figure out a process so that it doesn't happen anymore. Also talking about understanding the design capacity of the team in order to be able to estimate how much you can take on and how to allocate the projects. And this is something that probably guys have heard a lot from development teams. They're very good at this because they know based on the developers that they have, how many people they have, they know exactly how much they can take on. And this is part of the Scrum and the Agile practices. They can quantify the capacity of the team with numbers, and every sprint they only take as much work as they can comfortably handle. That's based on their capacity and their effort. And then you can also, it's about using objective and consistent methods to prioritize the features and the project. So like, running sprint planning sessions, like running a backlog refinement session, you always say, typically, this is how we're going to prioritize the work that we have. This is how we're going to divide it. And there's always the you have to prepare yourself for the curveballs and all that. But having a standard process, it's what's going to help everybody. And these are the focus areas of how we get our work done. Now, finally, design ops can be focused on how our work creates impact. And this is the one that help us plan for how we can measure, how we can socialize, and how we can enable design within the organization. So I think this one is pretty cool. So planning for how to measure. How do we make design accountable by defining and measuring design quality? And we're talking about like creating a definition of good and done for the design teams, choosing and aligning the metrics of design quality and tracking those methods over time. So you have to not only be able to get the work done and finalized, but what is it done? Was it satisfactory? And how do you track success for your team? And also about creating and using principles throughout this entire process that can be the objective measurements and like these are my KPIs or my key performance indicators for the team. And then planning for how to socialize. How do we educate others on the role and the value of design? And this means crafting a consistent message of the role and value of design and how to proactively share these with the organization. So the partners of the design team are the other departments that they're always touching, meaning you're working with the development team, you're working with marketing or any other department. Those are the design partners, and you have to share that value with your partners within the company. It's about capturing and sharing the success stories of the user-centered design processes so that you can have an argument as to why this is important. And it's recognizing and rewarding the teams that apply design practices to their work. And then how you enable. So how do we cultivate that understanding and the use of the design activities, even by those outside the design team? So enabling can consist of things such as educating the people outside the design team on how they can use our design tools and our activities, like just sharing the value of the user-centered design or design thinking processes. This is something that the entire organization can benefit from. Creating accessible design activity playbooks to avoid the design team being or even being seen as the bottleneck, because of course we don't want to be the bottleneck. And also implementing skill training to ensure that activities are understood and used appropriately. And those are the three pillars of design ops. This is how we work together, how we get our work done, and how our work creates impact. So if anybody has any questions, please feel free to stop me and we can chat about it at any point. So let's talk about who does design ops. Let's talk about that because we need to start by understanding that anyone can do design ops. But there are different approaches to it though. So we're gonna use design ops as a mindset, meaning everybody has to pitch in and everybody has to kind of participate in the design ops process. And then there is design ops, the role, which is when a person or multiple people are in charge of the actual operations for the team. So let's define each one of them.
David, it looks like quickly Elizabeth has a question. Sort of, could you give some more examples about assessing design quality? Like, how does that?
Yeah. So assessing design quality, I believe, is about, so first starting by how do you define what is a done product? And of course, this depends on your team and what we're talking about, because it's different talking about user experience design if you are designing a screen for an application or if you are creating images for a flyer, for instance. So assessing the design quality is, first of all, what it's done, what is the deliverable that you have to produce. Did you deliver on time? Was did the team or the designer receive the information they needed, enough information to get their work done? Was this done through a process as was there a request for the team or for the designer directly? And did we follow a process for that? And is this a repeatable process? So just to give you a practical example, when I was in this team before, that was creating a lot of graphics, and we were creating like tons of graphics all the time. This was to put on a website for promotion. So it was like every week there was a new promotion. And what happens is that marketing team will send us a request for these items, and they say, these are the list of promotions. We need an image that is more or less like this. So they give us a description. We need it by X date, and we need it in this format. So because they could be different. So that was the process of the request. And then how do you, so getting it done was very easy because you can say done is you deliver by X time, which is the due date, and it was received successfully, right? By the requester. Now, the quality is about, was it the image that they were looking for? Were there revisions? Was there one where there were 25 revisions as opposed to one? Or is there a consistent request from people where there are no revisions, or the other one where you say, this one is the bottleneck because this one has always 25 revisions for each image? That's kind of a bottleneck. So I think defining that quality of the deliverable is how efficiently you can deliver those. And that is just one way of assessing the quality. But I'm sure, like, maybe you, Chris, have another example of how you guys do it at your organization.
Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, to give some context, Elizabeth added a bit more to say that, especially if it's a high performing team. And I think one thing of assessing design quality for us is kind of that pixel perfect quality. In other words, I think where some design teams get away with using things like balsamic, or they take things to a mid fidelity, at least internally at our consultancy, we always bring things to the highest of fidelity, always being very obsessive about the grid layouts, making sure that that matches the intended columns that the front end developers are going to use. And also even things like, you know, the sizing of things like padding or elements are always divisible by 8, you know, designing on that kind of system of 8, 16, 24, 32. So yeah, when we get into a file in terms of assessing that it's of optimal quality, if there's things that are like fractional decimal points for elements of padding or things of that nature, that would be something that would kind of fail our assessment.
And it's interesting you mentioned that because I think teams are different, right? So for you guys, in what you guys do, it's very about the detail oriented aspect of design. So it's about the pixel perfect.
Yeah.
But like a development team is about, did we release something that they don't have any bugs? Did we release something that they don't have to be like a hot fix? So those are very easy, but on a design team, I think it's about perception and what your end goal is for that design organization, what the deliverable is about.
Yeah.
Cool. I have a question before we move on, not to derail us too much, but the point of socialize is one that really resonates with me, because I think sometimes people in the organization who are key stakeholders and kind of influence what the priorities are for a design team maybe do not have enough insight into what value they create. So I think like a lot of influence, but not a strong understanding. What are some kind of tactics for communicating the value of design to stakeholders like that who sit kind of far away from the design team?
So, you know, I want to give you an example of PwC right now. I think like some of my recent jobs, I've seen how companies are starting now seeing the value of user experience and using all these design thinking principles. And I was very happy to see when I joined PwC, they had this initiative that was called the Human-Centered Design Badge. So essentially, it was a mini training that you took a workshop, and it gave you a badge that was almost like a certificate that you can share on LinkedIn and everything. And it taught you through some practical examples what design thinking is about and how anyone in the company can use it, whether you are an accountant, whether you are an auditor, or you're actually doing design. Especially helpful for people that are working on product design, on development, because it is about focusing on the user and what is the end goal that we're trying to create. It's very easy for product owners to just think of the features, and I want to include features on this application and I want to add XYZ without actually asking the users, what do you need? So what's interesting and where I'm going with this is that they just created that mini workshop, and they share this with the organization. And within like a couple of weeks, there were thousands and thousands of people that just finished the workshop. They earned their badge. And it was so well received that we now have actual workshops that are called Citizen Designer Program. And this is about training people in more detail about how to use design principles to apply into their jobs. And most of the time it's not even about designing actually something, it's about solving problems. And I think that's a good way to socialize. uh, Another thing that some of these design teams have been doing is just kind of reaching out to certain teams and saying, hey, I think you guys can benefit from this kind of brainstorming sessions, or how we create a board of the key strengths and weaknesses of something to try to solve a problem. And once these new teams start learning about it, they get so like hyped up about it. They get so excited about learning something like that, and how design is not just about getting on Photoshop and putting something together, that they keep asking for more, and they start adopting these practices, and they say, we want to do the same and we want to learn a little bit more. So now PwC, in my example, is becoming a company where we want everybody to do design thinking and to be doing everything based on the user's needs. So I guess going back to your answer, I think it's just as simple as starting a conversation and reaching out with other people and say, hey, you guys wanna come and join one of our sessions? You guys wanna join one of our design critiques and see how we do our work? So it's just sharing how we do what we do.
Great, thank you.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's go back to who does design ops. So there, again, going back to anyone can do design ops, and you can have two options for your team. Let's the entire team adopt the design ops mentality, and everybody does a little bit of everything. Or there is a role where you say, we're going to have a designated person that is going to be doing this, or multiple people, depending on the size of the team, of course. So let's define each one of these. Design ops, the role. This means that there is a one designated person or a group of people that are going to be supporting the team and just on all the operations, so that they can focus on actually getting some work done and designing and doing what they do best. So not every organization does need the role, and not every organization actually uses the role, because they usually need it or use it when it's a very large team, or when there is a team that has like multiple disciplines. So when you have a lot of UX designers with front-end developers, and there are like so many pieces moving, that it's better to have a good structure and someone kind of being the mediator, almost like a scrum master for the team. And in the very large teams, I have seen that the design ops role is actually divided into some very specialized positions. And I was just reading about this recently, and I was surprised to see how many of these terms like are popping up everywhere. So we have design producers or UX producers, which are the people that are concerned with the project level design operations. We have design program managers or a UX program manager, which are the people that are working on the program, and usually they're working on organization level operations and working on the budget and this kind of stuff. You have research ops specialists, which I thought was pretty cool, because these are the people that are responsible for the like operational aspect of user research. So user research takes a lot of time because you have to talk to a lot of people, and a lot of these interviews are one-on-one. So the research ops specialists, what they do is they take care of sourcing and like trying to find the participants, the people that want to participate in these interviews, the people that want to give feedback, screening them for certain session that we're trying to define or to conduct, and just even the scheduling. This is a big help for the researchers to have someone that is helping with the schedule, working on the calendar, and having a repository, and having like all the records of how these interviews went, and just so that it's available for everyone else. That is pretty cool. And so just to sum it up, it's divided into many different roles based on what you need. And then we have design ops, the mindset. So whereas the design ops role is beneficial for certain types of team, like I was saying, the large teams or the cross-disciplinary teams, the mindset of design ops, it can be like used by any team and it can benefit anyone. So a team that embraces the design ops mentality is just, it means that the team understands and they see the necessity for a process, and to have some methods in place and even tools that support everybody and allows the design team to scale efficiently, like having a project management tool just to manage your deliverables and your pipeline. And when a team decides to actually adopt this mindset, is more about everybody working together to accept that we need processes, that we need structure, and for everybody to buy into it and make sure we're using it and we're implementing this. So like we have some very large teams in PwC, but we don't have a design ops role. I think we have that design ops mindset because it's easier sometimes to just have everybody being accountable, and that depends on the maturity of the team, of course, as well. Sometimes when you have a lot of seniors in a team, it's very easy to have them do their own and kind of self-manage. But when you have a ton of new people, or you have a lot of junior designers that need maybe a little bit more mentoring, that's when it's very convenient to have these project management tools and these boards just to even see what's going on and how you're tracking what the team is doing. um let's see, let's move on. So in short, design ops is the glue that holds the organization together. We're talking about design organization, and enables the collaboration among the team members. So remember the three pillars of design ops. This is how we work together, how we get our work done, and how our work creates impact. And like having these three principles, it has to be intentional, it has to be done right so that the operation can run smoothly. So that was a section about managing a design team from a process point of view. And now we're gonna get into how to effectively lead a design team, which is more about the personal side of things and how to connect with people. And, for design teams, an effective leadership and management means that you need to exponentially like help those designers to multiply their abilities. And it also means to help motivating them and how to connect with them, like I was just saying, how to connect with each one of your team members, and how to not be a roadblock as well, because you don't want to set some processes that are just going to set everyone back and it's going to be the bottleneck. And it's also about being their first line of defense, because sometimes you need to defend your designers. And it's also about creating that safe place for the design team so that they can grow as designers, as professionals, and so that everyone can learn from their mistakes as well. So let's dive into this. So the first point, I think, very important, you need to support your designers. A good leader needs to be there for the designers and support them when it's needed and when they need to defend their ways, because sometimes they're being told that they don't fit the mold. And this defense is needed because creative minds don't conform with normal. I think many of us here, designers, agree that we kind of go about things in a different way than most people. We tend to be a little misunderstood, whether it's because we think too far outside the range of what's accepted as normal, or because we always want to do more than what's expected of us from us, or just because creative people sometimes tend to be their own harshest critics. And I mean, I think we all go through this at some point. We are not fully satisfied with our own work sometimes, and that causes that we just get caught in a loop, and we're just overthinking our work. We're overthinking the project we're working on, and it just never ends. Or it can also be, I mean, developers call it scope creep. You just never end. I know that happens to me when I'm doing anything that is actually for me or for a friend. If I'm designing something for a friend, I can never get it done because I just don't think it's good. So that's funny. That goes back to being your own harshest critic. Um, and sometimes a client of the team or an upper management or a business stakeholders, they request a different designer assigned to their projects, or they just say, this designer is not working. I need that person to go. So you always have to ask for a very good reason, for multiple reasons as to why, and give me something that is qualifiable. Like, tell me if it is about their performance, it's about their attitude, or maybe just they just don't like how the designer dresses. And I mean, let's face it, we have a reputation for not being able to dress up. That's kind of common with us. But most of the time, they just cannot come up with a good reason as to why the designer is not working. And I think that's usually coming down to a lack of understanding of how the creative process works. And this happens because, corporate usually does not understand how creative ways work. So I mentioned jokingly about like being unable to dress up or being unwilling to dress up. But the truth is that designers usually don't conform to the antiquated corporate standards. And I'm talking about like a person that sticks to a schedule, the typical, you're talking about the 9 to 5, the person that is very happy wearing a tie, always yes sir. Nothing wrong with that. I mean, some people are happy with that. But the difference with designers is that designers usually don't hesitate to speak their mind because they believe in what they do. They want to talk about it. And because of that, just, I mean, they don't care who they're talking to. They want to talk about it. And those, they just say, this is not right. And sometimes they just I lost my word. I want to say, because they speak their mind, because they don't want to dress like the typical person that is going to an office, and just that's not being seen as normal. It's not a typical employee that it's following, like, let's say the handbook of the company. And I mean, designers usually work random hours. Sometimes you come up with your best work in the middle of the night. And I think that has happened to everybody. Like, I'm guilty of that. I usually wake up at 3 a.m. with an epiphany on the project I'm working on, and I just can't get back to sleep. So I have to get to it. But designers, they really don't have a problem working those odd hours, because it is about getting that spark, about finding that creativity, and that happens at any time. And as a leader, you have to be willing to take on that challenge and defend your designers when this is becoming a problem. Because if you think of these, I mean, those kind of traits are usually looked upon by HR. And if you were to take a swipe at a typical design team, the members will be normally defined as being unpunctual. That goes back to talking about the hours. They can be called pompous because they just speak their mind. They can be called harsh because sometimes we just have no filters. And they can be, again, because of the hours, they can be called undisciplined because they can just not follow a schedule. And the leaders have to work very hard to shift that perception that the designers are part of the team, just as everyone else. And we all have the same goal in mind, but we just go about it in a different way. And that doesn't mean they're doing it wrong. So like, have any of you guys have ever experienced this kind of, well, you have to follow your own hours, this is what we do here, and this is how we dress up, and this doesn't feel right. um, I know, for instance, I worked at this company at some point where everybody had to wear a suit and tie. It was a healthcare company, and designers and developers were the ones just complaining about it. And they were like, why do we have to dress up? It doesn't make any sense. We're not seeing a client. We're not like, why? Just give us a good reason why. And they say, this is just corporate standards. We have our rules and regulations, and everybody has to follow that. So yeah, most people didn't really care much about that, but the designers were like just whining. Really, they're like, I don't want to wear a tie. I just don't feel free doing this. I don't want to have to be here at 8 a.m. or I don't want to have to be leaving at 5 p.m. because sometimes I haven't finished my work and I want to finish doing it. So I think that it's unfair to have that kind of discrimination, because as long as you're getting your work done, that shouldn't be an issue, and your manager should be able to help you fight that battle, because at the end of the day, you're just getting your work done, right? And then, as an effective leader, you need to protect the team space and the process. So many companies, they tend to separate departments, and I mean physical separation, like how you have an accounting department, you have sales, software engineering, and you have everyone else. And then that separation, that physical separation, is very important for designers, because administrative and operational work is very different from creative work, and they have to be managed very differently. The reason being is because predictable processes are very different from the creative thinking. The people that work in administration and operation, they typically follow a tried and proven procedure, and that involves a lot of repetition. They're always doing kind of the same stuff. But the creative people, or the designers, it's always different, and it requires bouncing ideas off each other. It's about discussing possible solutions or coming up with a whiteboard, and let's see what we can figure out here, and eventually coming together to work with the right solution, and kind of getting some consensus. But the people in administrative and operational positions, they just live around these processes. They live on a roadmap, on a budget, on a projection. That doesn't work for creative thinking. We have to work on multiple iterations, and most of the time, this is about trying and failing multiple times. And that makes non-creative people very uncomfortable, because they're not used to like doing things and then like having to do it again and again because this design didn't work. Let's do another one. This is not gonna fit the mold either. That's not normal for them. And I think that goes back to the fact that, like we were talking before, designers do not conform to typical HR standards. But the designers have the same goal in the company. They just go about it in a different way. So the design leader has to be there to protect that creative space where the designers have that capacity to think freely and just to formulate these ideas without having to always stick to the same process. And that's easier said than done. It's kind of an art, because to achieve that, the design leader has to be able to just drive around a lot of bureaucracy. And remember, at the end of the day, the creative team and the whole organization are aligned behind the same goal. And just like repeating myself, they just go about it in a different way. So the creative manager it has to have, it's critical to have in mind that goal. And you have to be sometimes the interpreter of what it means to the business and what it's, and be able to convey the message that of what the creative team is doing and that value that they are creating. And it's something that you have to do again and again because it takes time and effort to make sure that the company and the design team are aligned and they kind of finally understand each other. And a good leader needs to recognize when change is needed. You know, sometimes you just need a little bit something different, different project. And a good manager has to be able to recognize when that team member that is not performing well in a particular project, or to, you have to figure out the root cause of the issue or what the issues are. So when a designer is having a hard time with a project, it can be as simple as having a candid conversation with them and find out that sometimes it's because they're having a mental block. Sometimes they just need an extra set of eyes and say, I kind of can't figure this out. Can you help me out here? Just getting a different perspective. Sometimes it's a matter of being for too long in the same project or working in the same product, which can lead to a little bit of burnout. But it's also sometimes a matter of personalities. You know, perhaps they're not being able to effectively communicate with the team they're working with or the stakeholders, or they're having an issue with someone else in that project that they're working with. So, you know, in one of my previous jobs, I had this team of designers and they were very talented. They have pretty cool work to show. And but there was this one particular designer that caught my eye because he was kind of always in a bad mood, and again, very good designer, but his peers were like, guy's kind of toxic. He's always kind of negative in a bad mood. So one day, talking about trying to make this connection happen, we just went for coffee and we had a chat. We had a chance to sit down and talk, and he was the first one to tell me that he knew he's been a little difficult, and I didn't know how to bring it up. He just kind of opened up. So he wanted to talk. So we continued. We started to talk about this, and just come to find out he had been working on the same project for years, and ever since he started with the company. And there were a lot of frustrations and issues with the way the business was managing the project, and he was just not happy about it. He didn't believe in the project anymore, so he was unhappy, of course, because he wanted to explore something new. He felt like he was stuck in that project and he didn't have a way out. So it was simple. So we figured out a way to have him in a different project, working a different product. He just needed a change of scenery, and it was night and day. I mean, guy completely changed his attitude. Everybody noticed, and it was pretty cool. But if you don't take action when you figure out something like that, it can actually lead to a talent exodus. You can start losing your people, and the quality of your deliverables can start just going down and even slowing down. And of course, if you lose people, you also have a lot of other challenges, such as onboarding, hiring takes a lot of time, costs money. And a good design leader should be able to handle these kind of issues that are not uncommon. And it can turn out to be a positive experience for both designer and the manager. And it's just a good opportunity for professional growth. Motivation. So a good design leader, you need to motivate your team with freedom, and you need to empower those designers to think freely, to think for themselves, to be able to self-manage and to set their own processes, to try what works best for them. So let's talk about that. You know that saying, if you love someone, set them free. I kind of have my take on that one. So it's, if you love your designers, let them be free. And there's no bigger truth than that when it comes to creative people, because let's just get into that. There isn't a better motivating factor for creatives than empowering them to think for themselves and just to be creative, to kind of work on their own thing, to be free. And of course, I mean, it's work at the end of the day. So you need to set some boundaries, and you need to set some processes, but you don't need to be authoritarian about it. You have to allow your people to self-manage. You have to set a process in place because that's important, but you also have to allow them to come up with their own processes and ideas and try something different. And in return, they're gonna give you 100% of their talent. They're just gonna be committed. They will accomplish what they need to accomplish. They will deliver, and it's gonna be outstanding. And they're also gonna look happy like the kid there and just gonna be smiling. And here's another quote. We're just doing doubles. So the importance of working on a free environment where self-management is empowered and encouraged should not be underestimated. So I hate to be repetitive, but a free environment is the kind of environment where creative minds work best. And that's where the inspiration comes naturally. And the end result is always 100%, is always outstanding. That's very important. And this kind of ties it together. Creative people are very driven. It's important for you to communicate purpose because creative people are driven and they need to believe in what they're doing. There has to be a meaning to it. And it's important to help them understand why something is being done and why it's important. And I think it's a very interesting point because often when you start talking about this, about having purpose and about like something, doing something meaningful, some people turn around and they're like, what are you talking about? Who cares? Like, just do what you have to do, collect your paycheck and just be done with it. And yeah, you could do that. I mean, why not? It's actually quite easy to not care. Just do your job, do what you're being asked to do and just shut up. But for creative people, this is very difficult because you can call it first world problems or brush it off as a millennial thing. But I cannot tell you how many times I've heard from my designers and my peers telling me that they want to make sure their work is meaningful and it contributes to the company or even to the world. I mean, depending on what you're working on. Imagine someone working on SpaceX. That's kind of a big deal. Um, so that's something that has to be taken seriously and it has to be cultivated because it shows that the person cares about what they do and that they will go above and beyond to deliver because they are committed and they want to do, they like what they're doing. And you need to connect with your people at a personal level. So connecting with people is much more than any management process that you can put in place. I mean, it might sound shocking to some people, but like people are the ones actually getting the work done. It's not the processes alone. I mean, the process doesn't do anything. People are the ones that are making things happen. So you have to care about the person right there. And connecting is important. You need to prioritize those individual conversations with your designers. And very quickly, you're going to start connecting with each one of these individuals, with each one of your team members at a different level, because again, everybody's different. And then the collective morality improves and the perception of your role starts being recognized because not only by your designers, but by yourself as a leader, not just a manager. So a good leader creates lasting relationships with their team members. So I understand that every team member is different and that needs to be managed in a different way. So in other words, you need to get to know every single person, every single one of your designers. And of course, this is at a level that you're both comfortable. By comfortable, I mean based on personalities, based on personal boundaries. Some people don't like to be very friendly at work. They just really mean business. They want to do what they have to do and that's it. But some others like to connect more at a more personal level. They're chatty, they like to go for coffee, they like to chat by the coffee machine or go to the break room and have a chat or go have lunch together. They some of them even like to hang out outside of work and that's pretty cool. And but connecting with people individually can be interpreted and achieved in different ways. So you have to genuinely care for this because if you don't care about your people being happy and your people feeling fulfilled, it's just not gonna work because it's gonna be superficial and you just I mean, you can see through it. It can be perceived as phony. So it takes time to connect with people, to feel comfortable with your designers and with any of your team members, and creating a relationship that has to be nurtured, and it has to be based on trust and mutual respect. So it's important to have regular one-on-ones, and it creates trust and a safe space to talk openly about anything. Um, I can honestly tell you how most of my one-on-ones, they're just about people venting out about issues they had. And sometimes it's conflict with a coworker, sometimes they're just frustrated about the project, things like that. And they just want to talk about it. Usually at the time that we're talking about it, it's already resolved. They don't really have a problem, but they just want to talk about it, and they just want to tell me how they handled it. Sometimes they're just very proud of how they did their thing, and sometimes they just want to ask me if what I could have done differently or what I think of what happened. And that leads to room for error, which is we all make mistakes, right? And that's okay. I mean, a designer has to understand that the client or some different clients, they're not always going to love their work, they're not always going to accept what they did. There has to be a revision, there has to be a change, and sometimes you didn't come up with the best solution, but that's okay. You have to learn from your mistakes, and that's how you grow as a professional. And you have to let them know that that's okay. It's also, I think it's also very important to have team building activities, and it can be many different things. You can be going together for lunch. You can order food to the office. I love having breakfast meetings with bagels and croissants and having coffee. That's pretty cool. Always, that makes you want to get up early and do it. And when the company allows it, it's cool to have like take an afternoon and go outside and do something fun outside of work. But it's I think most importantly is being available for the team. I think it's very common in the corporate world, and I think many of you that have worked for a company have heard this. When you go into a place and they want to tell you about the company values and how they live by it and how we care for each other, and this is what we what we live every day, and how my door is always open for you guys when you need me. But when it comes to it, the door is literally shut. I mean, you go look at the manager, and the office is actually closed. They're always in phone calls. You can never see them. They're having private important meetings. So they're not available. And that's not right. I mean, it's very common and it's very sad, but you have to be available for people when they need you. You have to be accessible. You have to be a person, right? And that's because designers are part of the team, just like everyone else, like we were talking. And designers do their job because they like what they do. They love that feeling of fulfillment every time they deliver their project, and they love doing that. So being an effective leader for a design team is more than just setting up those processes and assigning tasks. Sometimes it's a matter of defending your designer's decisions and how they approach a project. Sometimes it's more about advocating with the business for doing something different or for the way they did it. And sometimes it's about mentoring, sometimes it's about motivation. And but I think most importantly, it's just about caring, and it's about being human for your people.